Hey, it's Will here from HairGuard. So the goal in today's video is to make it clear for you the difference between normal hair shedding and hair loss. So by the end of this video, you'll know if you're just shedding some hair or if your hair loss will continue to get worse and lead to visible thinning and receding. So for starters, what is hair shedding? To answer this, we need to have a quick look at the hair growth cycle. This is the natural cycle that every single follicle on our scalp goes through. First, there is the anagen phase, during which the follicle actively grows out of the hair shaft. This happens at a rate slightly over a centimeter a month. The anagen phase lasts between 3 to 5 years. After anagen, we get the catagen phase, which lasts for a few weeks. During catagen, the hair shaft stops growing and the follicle starts to shrink. The third and final phase is the telogen, telo meaning final in Greek. During telogen, the follicle rests until the older hair is eventually pushed out by the new anagen hair that has started to grow underneath. When this happens, the hair is shed. The hair shafts that are in telogen are very easy to fall out. Any slight frictions such as brushing your hair, shampooing, or even rubbing against the pillow can be enough for the hair to shed. The fascinating thing about the human hair growth cycle is that it's not synchronized across the scalp. So at any given point in time, around 86% of the hairs on the scalp will be in the anagen phase, 1% will be in the catagen, and 13% will be in telogen. It is from this pool of 13% hairs that the shed hairs come from. If you extrapolate from these numbers, it follows that the expected number of shed hairs is around 50 to 100 daily. Most of these will go unnoticed, however, and typically people will only be able to spot a few dozen hairs at most. Now, a common feature of certain types of hair loss is that the rate of shedding increases dramatically. The person now starts noticing that they're shedding an unusually large number of hairs, and depending on exactly how bad their shedding is, they can sometimes even see entire clumps of hair on their brush or down the shower drain. The most common mechanism by which this happens is from an abnormally large number of follicles switching to telogen. So rather than the normal 13% of hairs in telogen, you now have a much higher percentage, meaning you will shed far more hair. So at its core, excess shedding is a symptom of a disordered hair cycle mechanism. We'll come back to hair shedding in just a minute. But firstly, what is hair loss and how is it different from what we've discussed so far? In a nutshell, hair loss refers to a decrease in the number of hair shafts at any one time on the scalp. In other words, the number of hairs on your head decreases dramatically to the point it becomes visible to the naked eye. And this decrease can either be generalized or confined to one part of the head. Excessive hair shedding can lead to hair loss, but it's not the only way. In some types of hair loss, there is no shedding or minimal shedding, but the person can still end up with a very compromised head of hair. So with this distinction out of the way, let's look at the major types of hair loss and how they relate to shedding. Firstly, androgenetic alopecia, AGA. Pattern hair loss is by far the most common type of hair loss in men, though it also does affect women. The hallmark of this condition is progressive hair follicle miniaturization, which eventually becomes irreversible. This miniaturization takes place between each hair growth cycle. In other words, hairs in affected parts of the scalp fall off at the end of telogen, and the new anagen hairs that replace them are progressively smaller. In the end, they become so small that they don't even stick out of the scalp. Abnormal hair shedding may or may not be present whilst this happens. Some men will go severely bald without ever noticing long periods of intense shedding. Other men with androgenetic alopecia, however, can experience periods of intense shedding. These come and go across the years, punctuated by periods without visible shedding. Shedding or no shedding, however, the hair loss will generally steadily worsen without intervention. Then we have telogen effluvium. This is a more diffuse type of hair loss that affects both men and women at any age. And the hallmark of telogen effluvium is hair shedding. This is because a large number of hair follicles switch to telogen at the same time, typically in response to a traumatic event like a major illness or stress. And around 3 months later, all these hairs start to shed at the same time, leading to shedding that is frankly hard to believe in some cases. There can be so many shed hairs that many patients collect them in bags to show their doctors. This person can just be gently rubbing their hand through their scalp and entire clumps of hair can come out. Unlike AGA, however, Telogen effluvium is generally reversible and most people will recover their hair even without treatment. The third and final major type of hair loss is alopecia areata. This is an autoimmune condition, and like telogen effluvium, it can affect males and females at every age. The main symptom is completely bald patches surrounded by intact scalp. Like telogen effluvium, alopecia areata is also reversible, at least in most cases. Sometimes though, it can progress to a chronic form where the bald patches wax and wane in severity or just get progressively worse. And like telogen effluvium, the patient will also see shedding, though it generally isn't as bad as telogen effluvium. If left untreated, the chronic forms of alopecia areata can eventually result in irreversible hair loss. It's really important to know what type of hair loss you have. This is the first step to helping it get better. Different types of hair loss require different approaches to treating them. I recommend working with a medical professional to help diagnose what sort of hair loss you have. For me personally, I had aggressive male pattern baldness, with almost all the men in my family being bald. I started losing hair at age 17. And I also created some products that helped my hair loss from getting worse, and you can see them over at hairguard.com. Okay, that's it for this video. If you have a question or a suggestion for our next video, let me know in the comments below, and I'll see you in the next video.